Hello, everybody. James here. It's a rare take two for me, Dutch. Because I just went hello, and you just somehow went hello at the same time, and then I called it story time.
Well, I thought you had just stopped.
Oh,
like you had a second thought in your head.
I did. I started calling it story time, and I thought, all right, let's do it anyway. Okay, right. Ask Dutch Anything, episode 67. Once again, Dutch has got books, the Facebook, the Instagram, blah blah blah. All the links in the description as well. For WSI, and most importantly of all, the email questions for dutch@gmail.com is how you submit your question into this show for consideration to be put to the Dirty Dutchman himself, and that is what so many of you do every single week, and that's what everybody in the format has done today. So straight away, we're going to get into the first question, Dutch, and it is from Mike. It says, you and James on occasion watched a number of hilarious and sometimes horrendous botches. It seems to be a very consistent theme now of some wrestlers attempting stuff that A, they shouldn't be doing, or B, aren't experienced enough to make it work, even if it could. At this point, it feels like sooner or later one of these moves, in quotation marks, is going to end up killing somebody if it hasn't happened already. I can understand the need to impress and stand out from the crowd, but what's Dutch's thoughts on this? Are things going too far, and will it take a botch, resulting in a death to stop it?
I was just talking about this last week, I think. It is a wonder that somebody somewhere hasn't been killed by doing these crazy spots. You know, if you can't do it, don't do it. That's an old Cornette saying. So if you can't do the spot, don't do the spot. But they come up with these, I mean, a lot of it has to do with height. And I saw a guy, I think we showed it here. He fell off a pole trying to hit a table and missed it. So it's only a matter of time before there is a spot that kills somebody. You know, when you come off a 15-foot pole and your body lands like flat like this and your head hits that concrete, that could very well kill a person. So, I've said it time and time again, if you're going to do anything in wrestling, have a reason behind it. You know, some of them, they just do spots. It looks like a tumbling exhibition. But if anybody sits back and says, nah, I don't believe that. Because if you get into a real fight, I mean, you're not doing that crazy stuff out there. And you may get some of the kids to like it because you're flying around like a damn cartoon character. But some of this stuff is too much. And you know they didn't think it through. They just want to do it just so they said they could do it. And then another guy's trying to do it and he messes it up. Yeah. And this might be, I hate to say this, I don't want anybody to get hurt in that ring, but doing crazy stuff like that won't make you any money. It'll cut your career short and it could cut your life short. So if you're doing stuff like that, or you know somebody who's doing stuff like that, tell them to stop before they really, really get hurt.
Speaking of people really getting hurt, I've lined up a video for you, Dutch, to react to this latest botch that was making the rounds last week. So I'm going to pause 1 second and we're going to watch it together. Well, Dutch has ruined the surprise by seeing it already, but we're going to watch it. Do you know that song by Vangelis? Do, 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 do. Hang on, there it is.
No. God.
Amazing.
So are we on right now?
Oh, yeah.
Man. Let's see this again. He was going to jump through the table. The guy was going to, you can see what he does. He's going to move, and the guy was going to go through the table. And then he lands on his head. And watch this guy's face. He went like that. Oh, my God, he's dead.
Why has he got shoes like the Iron Sheik?
I have no idea.
He's got curly toes. Here we go. Look at the referee. Look at the referee's face.
Yep. And there he goes. He misses it. Now, that is nobody's fault, actually. It's not the guy rolling off the table. It's just that when he rolled off, they didn't know that the table would roll too. And it rolled up, was sitting straight up in the air, and he hit it. And I bet he broke a few ribs too.
Do you know what?
So,
I wouldn't be surprised if he somehow broke nothing, because wrestlers just seem indestructible from some of the big stuff. Do you know what I mean? Then the little things, they seem to just shatter themselves.
Well, I want to know when the next time this guy does this spot. And I don't know whose idea that was. Oh, let's go through a table. Oh my God. But he goes to the hospital and they said, "What happened to you?" And he said, "Well, I was jumping off a ladder and the guy was laying on the two chairs and the door was on him and I was going to jump off and he was going to move and I was going to go through the door." They look at him like, "You got to be out of your goddamn mind to do that." And I wish they'd have kept the tape on. I wanted to see how that match would end. Do they ring the bell there because he's hurt, or does the guy pin him, or what?
He probably kicks out at 2, and they probably go for another 8 minutes.
Probably, and too much.
You bring up a very good point, Dutch. I'm sorry to interrupt. You bring up a very good point. Is it just like these two guys in the ring? We don't even know their names.
No.
We can probably find them out, but the fact is that I don't know. I mean, there's a few examples, maybe like John Moxley or someone. There are very few examples of people who are doing death matches or ridiculous shit like this on the indies who make it to be big stars in wrestling. So I'm not quite sure what the end game here is for most people. It's like most people would be better served honing and developing a character, but that's easier.
Well, hey, that's the last thing they want to do, is develop a character, because they got to think about it. Then they got to go in the ring and they got to do stuff that this character would do instead of just doing a spot. See, he's seen that spot. I guarantee you, this is how that spot was put together. One guy says, "Hey man, why don't we do this? Set the chair up. It's a hardcore match, and I'll lay across and put the door down, and they'll give me a base, and I'll lay there, and then you go to dive off, and I'll roll off, and you'll go through the door." The people go, "Wow!" They didn't even go, "Wow!" They went, "What the?" And they thought he died. And that's what I'm saying. A little bit more. Yeah, he could have punctured a lung. He could have done a lot of things. But, and I would be interested. If anybody knows who this guy is, drop us a note here. Ask Dutch. And what's the email address there, James?
Questionsfordutch@gmail.com. I could find out who it is. But
yeah, I want to find out who he is.
Here's the point.
And
why?
If he is, and when, and why is right. And I'm not saying that the motivation or the motive of the move, the guy wants to do good. He wants to do something that is remembered. And guess what? He did it. He's remembered, but I don't think he can do it again.
Okay. Here's something I wanted to mention to you. How many times have you seen someone dive off a ladder onto a table or a door, whatever it is, dive off a ladder onto somebody else, whether they hit them or miss them? How many times have you seen it? 4,000 times? 5,000?
Yeah. That's it.
Right. So let's say that guy hits him. Do you know who would care, apart from the people in the crowd? Nobody. Do you know who cared when he botched it? And when I say cared, everyone watched it, they laughed, and then they might have shared it, and then they moved on with their lives. No one thought, "Man, what an incredible specimen, some promoter should sign him." They think, "Haha, what an idiot," and then forget about who. Right. And we don't even know who he is.
That's right. They don't care. They don't have any sympathy for him. And the first thing they said was, "Boy, he effed that up, didn't he?" That's the first thing they thought. And then if he was really hurt, you could feel sorry for him a little bit, but. And I do feel sorry for him because he was trying. He wasn't lazy, but I think he was overweight anyway. But I think probably that overweight condition he was in probably saved him.
Could have.
So.
But here's the thing: you're looking at your phone, right? You watch it. Ha ha ha! Oh, that hurts. Scroll to the next thing. And that's it.
You wouldn't send it to anybody?
Oh, I might send it to somebody. But that's it. You know, you send it to someone to get a reaction. Ha ha ha! Isn't this funny?
Yeah.
Or ow! Isn't this guy stupid? No one's saying, "Man, we should sign this guy next." It serves no it serves no purpose. It takes no talent to jump off a ladder. I used to love it as a kid, but you know, you see something so many times, Dutch, and it just loses all of its impact.
They have nothing else to do. But if you tell a story, how many books have been written since the beginning of time? Trillions. And they all have a story. So if you could tell a story in 30 seconds, if you want to out there, just say, I don't like you because you went out with my ex-old lady. That's why she divorced me. And now you're fighting over something. You're fighting to get even. But they just going and having a match? Why? And yeah, you see that. See, they think that hardcore stuff is the only thing it is. And you don't even have to learn hardcore. You just got to do it and mess it up. And going back to Jim Cornette, if you can't do the spot, don't do the spot.
Next.
And that is one thing you would never see me doing, diving off a ladder. I'm not doing it. I won't even get on a ladder. So.
Next question then. Wayne from Montgomery, Alabama. Hello, Dutch. I've always been a big Paul Bearer fan. Real name William Moody. But my question to you, Dutch, is when did you first meet Paul Bearer? And do you have any idea why he was in TNA for a shorter amount of time as Percival Percy Pringle III? Thank you. When was the first time you met Paul?
I was in Florida. I was booking Florida. Michael Hayes was there helping me. And he told me about this guy that was I think he was in Louisiana, I think, or Alabama. Could have been Mississippi, I don't know, but somewhere. And he says he is he's a real mortician is what he is. And he says, but he wants to get in. And I think Michael had used him on some shows. And I never had met him before I brought him in. I brought him in on Michael Hayes' suggestion, and he was good. He was real good. He looks like a manager you just like to kill. And of course, he never met his calling until he got with Undertaker. And the problem, he got lucky there because they wanted him to be the mortician for the Undertaker. And it turns out he was a mortician. So he was in like Flynn then. Mm-hmm. And Vince heard that. He said, well, we can do it because he knows what he's doing and what needs to be done. And how long was he with Undertaker? 10 years? 15 years?
Yeah, somewhere around there. There was a couple of breakups and reunions and stuff. But full-time, I believe Paul Bearer was with The Undertaker for less than 6. Actually, and then there start being reunions and stuff like that here and there. But yeah, he turned. I remember this. He turned on the Undertaker at SummerSlam '96, and then aligned himself with Mankind, and then Kane later on.
But they had the story. They had a story, right?
Yeah. Who was
the brother?
Terry Gordy. I'm sorry, I said Tracy Smothers, and Goldust briefly as well. But yeah, told the story.
They had a good story, and the Undertaker would tell you, he says, I can teach you 6 moves or 5 moves. He said, I never used over 5 moves in a match. But he said, I didn't have to. I just had to be the Undertaker, sit up, do the press slam, the slam, and we'll go home. That's all they had to do. So, but Undertaker had a bad back. He told me one time he was doing these moves somewhere in Texas or somewhere. I said, man, you need to quit. I told him this before he hurt his back. I said, you need to stop. You're too big of a guy to do that. And you're going to get hurt. And he kept on and kept on. And I saw him one day. I says, well, you're limping. And when he would walk, he would limp a little bit. You never saw that on his entrance, but when he was walking around the dressing room, he would limp just a little bit. I said, well, you kept taking those bumps. He said, yeah, I should have listened to you. So, but you can't be a big guy and take bumps like that because he took, he's 6'9", 6'10". He's a pretty big guy. So, but he said, I wish I'd have listened to you a little more. I said, well, doesn't matter now. It's too late now. So
With Paul Bearer, I think he would have said this himself when he was doing Percy Pringle III, that he was just basically a Bobby Heenan ripoff. Is that how you remember it?
Yeah, but he was a Bobby Heenan ripoff.
Yeah, he basically he just copied Bobby Heenan entirely. He said.
Yeah, but it was a different style and substance. You know, I mean, Paul, he would try to pitch a fit, but when he pitched a fit, nobody thought of Bobby Heenan. You thought of you thought of Paul Bearer. I mean, and I do think that Bobby Heenan was probably the greatest manager ever, except for Vince. But he was the greatest man. He pitched the fits, he pitched the bitches, and he could work. He was a wrestler first. And when you got him in the ring, when those good guys started pounding around on him, he would fly. So, but he was a good one. And Bobby Heenan, God rest his soul, but he's no longer with us. But I put him number one on the manager's list.
Do you have any insight? I'm not sure you were even with NWA at the time. Why Percy Pringle III ended up in TNA for about a year?
No, I think his I don't know what happened to him in WWE. They finished him up, I think.
It was his weight, apparently. I think they wanted to get rid because he just kept ballooning in weight, and I think they wanted to get rid of him for health insurance reasons at one point, I guess.
Probably.
But he was a road agent off camera for a while, and his contract ended on October 14th, 2002. Then he ended up in TNA for about a year, maybe. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if there's any crossover with you and him there.
No. I was already gone. What year was he there?
No, 2003. So you might not have returned from Puerto Rico by the time he'd gone.
No. That was right before I went back there.
Yeah, right. Let's go to the next one. Al says, what Dutch's memories of wrestling at the Louisville Motor Speedway, probably early to mid-90s. I saw a photo of Dutch and Bill Dundee against the Master of Pain, Undertaker, and someone else at the Speedway. I believe Dutch was wearing his furry boots. So this would be 1990 or something, surely, or 89. I'm not sure how many times they had the racing and wrestling, but it was at least once a year. The first time it was scheduled, Jerry Lawler was supposed to be there, but it got rained out. When it got rescheduled, Lawler did not appear. So there you go. So, but you were there.
Yeah, that was the first race I've ever been to. And it was truck racing. I think it was on a Tuesday too. No, what was it? Maybe a Friday night. But it was we'd go out and watch the races, them race each other around and around. To me, I like to watch the finish, but after that, unless it's Daytona or Darlington or, Charlotte or a big raceway, I mean, they're going around that, not this track, but I think it was a half mile around it. But they go around Daytona. What's that? A 2 mile? Do you know anything about NASCAR?
No, apart from the fact that it looks tedious.
It's 150,000 people they can get in there, and they are racing around, and they're like doing 190, 200, 210 miles an hour. Yeah. Brother, that's just a little too fast for me.
And surely everyone's just waiting for a crash.
That's what it is. They're waiting for something and I think some of those crashes are set up, to tell you the truth, if you can set up that, or you may not even have to set them up. But boy, sometimes when those 13 cars and 15 car pileups, that takes half your cars out. Then it becomes a race if you only got like 10 cars out there. You got room to move around. But it is, those cars are loud and they're flying at 220 miles an hour. That's just a little too fast for me. And I mean, it looks good on TV, but I don't know if I could sit up there. And the people sit up there in the stands. It's hot as hell. It's in the summertime, and they're drinking beer after beer after beer after beer, and cars are wrecking. And they just go to see the wrecks. If you just had a race without any wrecks, people go, it sucked. But But they have those cars built now that really rarely does a driver get killed, because they got them. They got them now to where they're like, they're encapsulated. I guess they're just molded in there, and then they're protected on all sides, which says a lot about their engineering that they make those cars. But it is a sight to see, though. If you've never been to a race, if you've seen it on TV, that's enough for me. But it's loud and it's hot.
But where do you fall into all this? Was this like a halftime entertainment thing or what?
What's this?
Well, when you wrestled at the Louisville Motor
Speedway.
No,
it was a special show. They had racing and wrestling, and they'll run a few little they'll run a few little races, and then they'll pull a truck out there with the ring in it. And the ring sits on, the frame. It sits on the frame. Then they start driving. And it's funny, you don't get to the finish. Okay, here's the oval here. You start right here. Then you go around the first turn, then the second turn, then you're going down the back stretch. And that's where the heels get their heat. Going down the back stretch, and all of a sudden you're coming around the third turn, and now the baby faces start making their comeback, and boom. And right when you get right in front of the home stand, boom, the baby faces go over. And you only make one trip around there. So I was within there with dirty white boy, and he was beating the living crap out of me. He'd been hammering the beer down. We got on the backside. I'm like, my God. I says, brother, they cannot tell and they cannot hear when you're hitting me so hard. You need to loosen the hell up. Oh, I'm sorry. And then we went around. We finished up the match. Then we had another one. It was a drag race. It was a once around the track, and they wanted me to drive. I said, I didn't even drive up here. I'm damn if I'm going to drive around this damn track. So guess who drove in my place?
Was it the Undertaker?
Undertaker. Oh, yeah, and I put him in there because he went 1-1, and he wanted to do it. He said, I'll do it. I said, well, get in there. And he was wrestling. This is another show we did there. And it was Kerry Von Erich in the other car. And I swear he went around the first turn, and he was leading. Undertaker was leading, and somehow it just died on him. And I saw Kerry slam the brakes on. He went back, beat up Undertaker in the car, pulled him out, slammed him on the hood of it, and got back in the car and went around and beat him. I said, boy, you talking about doing a job. You weren't even competitive in it. So he said, yeah, son of a bitch.
Hey, what was the capacity of this place?
I'd probably get 5,000 people in there.
Oh, was that it? I was thinking 100,000 or something.
It's like a little soccer field.
Right.
And they got the tracks that's out in front. They don't have tracks all the way around, but they have stands right here where it's a good view of the track and everybody can see what's going on. But that's about it.
Right, next question. Travis in Virginia says, I've heard multiple people mention that Brad Armstrong was hilarious in the locker room but couldn't connect in a promo. Why does Dutch think that is? Was he trying to do a poor imitation of Bullet Bob? Or what held him back?
Hey, Brad Armstrong, very few people could hold a candle to him in the ring. He could do it all. He was light on his feet. He was not as big as some of those guys, which helped him because he was a baby face. But when he got on camera, he just froze. Now, you get him on the camera sometimes in the back, and he was a little better, but I think he got so nervous talking. And if he could have done a half an interview like Dusty or some of them, he'd have been a bigger star than what he was. But And all those Armstrongs, they were all good, all of them. Actually, the worst of them did the best. Actually, Road Dog wasn't a great wrestler, but he had a great character and could do a great interview.
Well, isn't there a lesson right there?
Yep. And here was Brad out there doing leapfrogs and drop kicks and head scissors and this and that and the other and looking flawless, not a mistake at all. And he had see, a good babyface has good balance. So when they say they give you a head scissors, they got to ride you up, and then it's a timing issue anyway. But you didn't see Road Dog doing that stuff. He just get in there, beat the crap out of you, and you started to come back on, and you go home 5 or 6 minutes, and he would do that.
I find it crazy with Brad because I don't know if you know this, in like '99 when Russo got to WCW, they put him on TV again, and they gave him the character Buzzkill, which was meant to be a complete Road Dogg ripoff. And he couldn't do it, and it was terrible. And the thing was, like, these guys are brothers. How can be one so charismatic on screen and one only be charismatic not on screen?
You know, Brian was the youngest, and he was the biggest. Seemed like, it should have went the other way or something, but Brian was taught by his father, and Brian had all these years to watch his father. And Bob, he's not with us anymore either. Great guy, but he didn't do anything in the ring other than do a comeback and do his knees. He would do his knees together. People just go nuts. A stupid move like that. And he knew it was stupid. That's why he did it. But he would go into the ring, and, you wouldn't have to go like 20 minutes with him. 10 minutes with Bob Armstrong, 12 minutes, that's it. You was getting out of there. So, but he was easy to get heat on. He was over too. And he wore that bullet mask, and everybody knew it was him, but it's one of those deals where, I think he lost a loser leave, and he came back as the Bullet, and he just kept the mask on.
Yeah, I still find it crazy that they were brothers, because they just look the complete opposites in how they presented themselves on screen. And but the thing is, I don't get is that Brad had 30 years, and didn't he start in the business tagging with his dad, Brad, as well? So you would have thought that somehow the on-screen thing would develop over time.
I don't know who the oldest was.
I thought it was Brad. I figured it was Brad.
I don't think I may be wrong, but I know that Road Dogg was the baby of the bunch.
Yes, he was indeed. I'll check on that later of who was oldest. But while we move on, Freddie asks, I am a far southwest Virginia guy, grew up watching Mid-Atlantic, NWA, Continental, and whatever else I could find. I remember hating Dutch when I got into everything. I also remember when Dutch...
That's a bad word. You shouldn't hate anybody.
Intense dislike, I guess. I also remember when Dutch and Bobby Jaggers showed up as the Kansas Jayhawks out of the blue. It was guys I knew who weren't really a tag team or a name tag team. They just came out of nowhere. Did they sign you, Dutch, with the idea of being a tag team, or did you and Jaggers decide to join up and try to get signed off for that matter? Did you sign Planning as a single and they changed it up for you? So how did you end up getting... was it Dusty who paired you?
Oh, Dusty booked me in Mid-Atlantic. He was a booker. I just called him up one day and I said, hey, got any room for me over there? He said, baby, we got room for the Dutchman. So, and next week he called me back and he said, hey, baby, we'll put you in a tag team with Bobby Jackers. Call you the Kansas Jayhawks. I said, okay, it was a job. Even though I'm from Texas, I billed myself from Texas. Now all of a sudden I'm a Kansas Jayhawk. Now Jaggers, he is from Kansas. So, and we did pretty good there for a while till they wanted, and they had bought Florida. I think Florida went out of business about that same time. And I think Charlotte, or the Mid-Atlantic territory, took it over. And then I had just left Florida about 6 or 7 months earlier to go to Mid Atlantic, and they wanted to send me back down there. I said, nope, not doing it.
Hmm.
I couldn't go.
We've,
so I said,
I was going to say we have told this story quite a few times. Well, not quite a few times, but we've told this story where it was when you went to Florida and you left because it was a non-entity at that point. But I wanted to ask you this: with Bobby Jaggers, right? When I went back, sort of in your history to like study more, like you know, when I started doing that as a wrestling fan, I always associated you as a tag team guy. But then every other territory you went in, you were always pretty much a single.
yeah.
So did you want to be a single in the NWA? I mean, how did you sort of adapt to being a tag team guy, I guess?
No, I'd rather be a single than do a tag team. Tag team is easier on the body because you're only working half the time. But if I had a match, I would prefer to be a single because it was just what I wanted to do and whatever was getting over with the people. And I would just rather be a single. I very seldom was I ever a tag team.
Did you ever approach Dusty and say that? Because, I mean, you never know. You could have been doing Bobby Jaggers out of a job if you said that as well, I guess. And you ended up being a single in the NWA.
Well, he told me one time, he says, that's me. And I like Dusty. He said, I'm thinking of something to you, and let me work it on it a little more. Let me work it on it. I said, well, but so I guess he was working on it while they were taking over Florida and wanted me to, since I'd been down there before, he wanted me to go back. And I said, I can't do that because financially it would have been almost a suicide to go down there because the guys weren't making nothing. And to start a new territory, that's the old saying. I've said it here before. How do you make $2 million, $1 million in the wrestling business? Start with $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I knew they wasn't going to pay any money, so I didn't go.
Why didn't Dusty ever ask you to help out with booking or anything? Or why did you never do that in WCW or the NWA?
Well, the only thing I can say is that I think he had some not hard feelings, but he knew I'd book Florida and did a pretty good job with it in a short amount of time. And I've told that story and I took it over. Dusty had taken everybody who was anybody to Charlotte. I started with nobodies. And by the end of 3 months there, about 12 weeks, I started to sell out in some of those towns. Of course, it was a big show. Flair would come in and, when you brought Flair in, you'd build up to him for a month. So if he didn't draw you a good house, you were missing something. Yeah, I mean, you just wasn't doing it right. And I think there was a little resentment on his part because I don't know how long it took Dusty to get that territory up and drawing the way it was. Not when I was there, but I remember going down to Florida in the earlier years. Now just tremendous houses like Miami and Tampa, and there's not overflow, but really really good houses. So, and when he left, Eddie Graham. Eddie Graham was his like protege, and Eddie Graham would help him halfway book, and they did good business. So when I went down there, Eddie was there, but Eddie was bothered by business or lack of business in some of his business encounters. And I went down there in about September, which was a bad time to go anywhere in the territories because school has just started.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a bad time to go somewhere. And I learned that the hard way. And then I made it to February, and that's when Eddie killed himself. And I've told that story too. So good guy though, and I hate he did that. But I think that I don't know if the wrestling business did it or so much as his other. He lost money in other places, so he couldn't stand it. So he took himself out.
Next question. Jimmy says, I remember Dutch once saying that he doesn't work overtime and that outside the ring he's no longer his character. But I'm sure everyone can think of examples of wrestlers who've been playing a character for so long that the lines between the character and the real person become blurred in real life and things start to go badly wrong for them, e.g. Flair, Hogan, Warrior. I seem to remember Shane Douglas saying that he consciously puts Shane away in a mental box until he's needed again to avoid this happening to him. I was wondering if Dutch had any interesting stories of this happening to people he worked with, or did he ever have a moment where he felt like this was starting to happen to him?
What was starting to happen again to me?
Basically, your on-screen persona was bleeding into your personal life.
Well, not so much, but say I was a heel and I'd be raising hell, and when I'd go out, if I was in a good mood, I would give the fans hell because that's part of the show too. But if somebody come up and wanted me to sign this or sign that, and I may sign it, I may not sign it according to what I was at the time. But if they expected to see Dutch Mantell on the outside, I'm sadly to say that no, Dutch Mantell didn't work overtime. You'd buy a ticket to watch me in the ring, but you didn't buy nothing to watch me in the parking lot getting in the car and leaving. So, and you don't know what those guys got set up or anything. Security was, not that good. So the easiest way out of an arena is the way I want to take it. So if one guy come up and I'm gonna do something to Dutch, or he hits me or something, then now it's on. Now you can get knives, you can get cut, you can get shot, you can get a lot of things. So I was the heel going in, but a super baby face coming out. Because I was saying, hey, everybody, how are you? Did you enjoy it? They said, oh, you're a lot different you are in the ring. Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
What about in WWE later on? When you're
What
Zeb
now?
Coulter. So when you're Zeb Coulter and, people, I'm sure you bump into people in real life, maybe not necessarily the fans hanging around the arena, but, in a 7-Eleven down the road or something and someone walked up to you, were you Zeb Coulter at all, or were you just you?
Well, WWE, you don't get that. They understand I think they just understand that it's a performance, period. Now, in some of these other places that I worked, Mississippi and Tennessee and Kentucky, yeah, they thought that most of them thought they could whip your ass anyway, which is actually good because now that they buy a ticket to go in there and see you get your ass beat, and then if you win, now they feel, especially if they've been drinking, and it gets hairy then. I was in Bowling Green, Kentucky one time, and this guy, I was in this tag team match, and you couldn't do spots. It was two guys who couldn't do it. One guy was, I think, the worst wrestler I've ever seen in my life, who was the son of the promoter. His name George Goulas. You've heard of him.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he was horrible. And all of a sudden, I'm down in the chairs, and we shouldn't have been out of the ring anyway. But if we hadn't have done that, the people would have sat there like this. They wouldn't have give a crap. And one guy, he came across with a punch, but it wasn't a punch. It was like a clothesline and got me with this part of his arm. Bam! And he hit me so hard. But he didn't even knock me down. And I turned to him and I said, you son of a bitch. And since he didn't knock me down, now I see him. He said, oh God, I've done it now. And I got him and took him down to his knees, and I'm pounding the crap out of him. My partner comes in to help me. We beat that boy half to death. I remember, I've never done this move to anybody. I hooked my fingers in his nose. I was behind him and pulled up as hard as I could. And I was punching the hell out of him. And then the cops came and, they took him out. And we finished the match up, got to the back. And the guy, he just left in a car. They didn't arrest him or nothing. I said, well, Then when they told me the story the next week when I was there, I said, well, hell, he could come back and shoot me tonight if he wanted to, because nobody had a warrant for him or anything. So thus is the life of a professional wrestler if you're not in WWF, because at least they have some semblance of order there, and it's kind of put on orderly. These matches here were just like, I've worked independents that are better than some of these groups I've worked with.
So with the example of Shane Douglas, and he's saying, like he made the conscious effort to leave Shane in a box and then just beat Troy in his personal life. Who are the opposites? So obviously this fella said, Jimmy says, Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, some examples. Were there any other people that you worked with over time and you could just see over the years that they were just starting to believe their own hype and just sort of morphing with their on-screen character?
Name those three you just said.
Flair, Hogan, Warrior.
Savage.
Did he really change over the years? Because you always said, he was always intense, he always spoke like that. But did he really change?
He always spoke like that. Oh, yeah. I took a few trips with him, and he was talking Randy. He was in savage mode the whole time. See, he morphed. He was Randy Savage. Then he morphed into he's Randy Poffo. Then he morphed into Randy Savage, and then he morphed into the Macho Man, Randy Savage. I mean, the character stayed the same. The name changed. And yeah, he wouldn't change for anybody. If he was talking to anybody that he thought was a fan, he was the same as he was on TV. He would legitimately stay in character, and of course the people enjoyed. They wanted to talk to him. He was the type who was a bad guy but a good guy at the same time. See, I've seen even when he was a bad guy, I'd see people cheer him. So he was what he wanted to be. But great to have a match with, because man, the guy he was 120 miles an hour at all times. He was moving, and you had to be in shape to wrestle that guy too, because he was in shape.
Are there any other examples of somebody you can think of that just took themselves way too seriously?
Most of the baby faces I've known.
Really? Why the baby faces?
Well, I can't think right off the bat, but it would be Hogan and Ultimate Warrior. Savage ended up that way, I think. And who was that other one you named earlier?
Flair. Ric Flair.
Well, I don't know. Flair was he wasn't. I don't think he was as bad as Hogan was, because Hogan had the power. Ultimate Warrior had the power. And I guess Flair, when he had the power, he could do what he wanted to do. Nobody say anything to him. That's a rudderless ship. Because somebody has to have the ideas of where this is going, how's it going to end up. But, and I guarantee you, when Hogan left the building at night, he was thinking of his next opponent, not what somebody else could do. He didn't give a crap about that, what he could do. Totally.
We may finish on this question then. Rob from London, UK. Is booking a program for female wrestlers different from booking men? Would the length of the program change, or the pace? And also, would you pitch the story to appeal to couples watching live and female fans watching live?
They used to have a girls' organization. It was called the Glorious Girls of...
Gorgeous
Ladies of Wrestling.
That's
Glow.
Yeah.
Glow. Did you get it in UK?
If we did, it was on such a niche channel. I think we may have done, but it was on a very niche cable channel.
Yeah. Well, I used to like it because the work was the shits, but I like to see the entrances, and the work was just horrible. But I wasn't watching the wrestling. You was watching the girls, So, and I think if you took something like that and made it almost a group exclusive to itself, like I did in TNA when I had the what were their names? The Knockouts
Mm-hmm.
in TNA. We drew some really, really good ratings for those girls because we had them stand alone, and it wasn't just a TNA type deal. They could actually wrestle, and the people would it would do the best rating of the show. And we even had Sting, we had Angle, we had Jeff Jarrett, but the girls had Gail Kim and Awesome Kong. So I had something to work with there. So they they really were easy to work with. They had some good ideas, and Gail was she was my locker room sergeant, and I'd get with her and we'd go over the matches because we'd only have like 2 matches a show from the girls, but they always did a good rating. And we only had like 10 girls, but Awesome Kong was
but
she was the big heel, and
but
she was great.
Would you book them any different way than you would the men then?
Not really, but you have to have a system. See, Awesome Kong, I wanted her to be my heel. So I purposely did not. I just had her beat all the other girls in about 3 minutes or less. So she looked like a monster. Then I'd have Gail go out there, and but she would go more than 3 minutes. She'd go about 8 or 10, but it was a contest, and she would eke out a win. And then when they went for the title, Kong beat her. But they went more than 3 minutes. She beat her in about 7 minutes. So all this is just getting them over. And I finally worked an angle between Gail and Kong, and they did a better rating than Sting and Flair, a better rating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what Kong she soured on TNA is because they didn't give her any extra money when they did that big rating. So, and I could do nothing about that. I could go in there and say, hey, you give Kong some extra money, but they look at me and they say, you're not in charge of paying the talent. We are. So, but I think Kong, when she left TNA, I think she just got out of wrestling. I've heard nothing about her since she left TNA.
Well, she ended up starring in Glow in the series.
Yeah, she did that, but I've never heard of her actually working with a legitimate wrestling company. She may have made some independent shows, but that girl, there was money written all over her. I saw her when she was in WWF, and what happened to her there? I think Vince would have went with her there, except she got pregnant.
She did. They brought her back. She had a miscarriage, and then they brought her back, and she just said, just physically, mentally, she wasn't there, and she just ended up just leaving and never making a return. Yep.
Something like that. Yeah. But I think she would have been, if she'd have stayed there, she'd have been I think she'd been in Hall of Fame by now.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think she was that good.
She's had 15 matches since she's had 10 matches in the last 8 years. Yep. So she's long since out of the business, pretty much.
No, she'll never come back to it at all.
People forget this. She was very briefly in AEW.
She was?
She was. She had a few matches in AEW, and then they got rid of her.
I never saw her.
There you go. No, this is back in... Her last match was in January 1st, 2020. So AEW... So she was in... What? 3-4 episodes. She was there for a few months at the beginning and went again.
Well, if they'd have handled her right, she could have been a big star for him.
Indeed. Right, on that basis, we're going to shut down Ask Dutch Anything. Everybody, thank you so much once again for watching. And if you want your question considered for a future episode, the email is questionsfordutch@gmail.com. Yes, Dutch.
A guy wrote me, and he says, I heard you talk about a wrestler being a serial killer. And he said, that intrigued me. So he says he's writing every day just a little bit, putting it together. And I told him to send it to me. And I can't remember his name now, but I want to see what he's written. So, but that would be a different twist on it. Wrestler goes to a different town every night, only stays in the territory for like 10 weeks, 2 months. Then he's gone again to another territory in a different car, but he's wearing a mask. So anybody that sees him, you don't know what he looks like. So I think you could take that story and go with it.
Could have been Texas Dirt.
From Dirt, Texas.
Yeah.
That's where I was from.
No, you weren't. No. Texas Dirt was from Dirt, Texas.
That's exactly.
You were from Oil Trough.
I was from Oil Trough, Texas.
Yeah.
They're like only 50 miles apart. I used to go through there sometimes.
I used to see him sometimes driving past him.
I'd just right there and toot my horn, doo-doo, and take off.
One more thing I forgot. Scott Armstrong is the oldest. Then Brad Armstrong was a year younger. So there you go.
Okay.
So go Scott, Brad, Steve, Brian.
See, what would I do without you?
Well, you wouldn't record a podcast because we know you can't get your camera working.
And I knew that, not definitively, but Scott surprised me by being the oldest.
Yeah, he started after Brad as well.
And then it was, and who was the other brother?
Stevie,
and then
and then Brian.
Road Dog told me one time. He said, "Dutch Mantell, you son of a bitch." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I hated you." Because Bob, I don't think he smartened them up for a long time. They thought this wrestling was real, I think. And he said, "I hated you and I wanted to beat the crap out of you." And I said, "I'd have killed you, Brian." And he said, "Oh, I'd kill you right now." But he did tell me that. But he was a big fan of it. So when you talk to somebody like that, that's a big fan, you know the other fans are going to follow suit. And I liked it better when everybody was kind of believed all the wrestlers didn't like each other and anything could happen. So, but anyway, let's get out of here. We'll see you next week. And on behalf of James and myself, we, the people.